You know, it's Miss D. Gordon representing.
Hello, welcome once more to my channel. I'm Donisha Gordon, and this is DG Makes Math Easy, where we are intentional about making math new dimensional. Today's topic is differentiation, and we will be working a few CSEC multiple choice questions. You might want to pay attention to the left side of your screen, where we will have some pointers as we go along. Please remember to like this video, share with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. And finally, be a part of the discussion below. Let me know in the comments what topics you would like to see being reviewed. Now, one of the main rules of differentiation we must know is this one called the power rule, where if we are given y as this expression, then to get the derivative or the differential of y, as we term dy by dx, we are going to multiply by the original power and decrease the power by 1. So ensure you know this rule. Alright, let's go. It is also great if you know these other two rules, which is also based on the power rule. And so if you are given y equals a constant times a variable, and you're differentiating with respect to that variable, then the derivative or the differential is going to be the constant itself. Alright? And if you are given a constant to differentiate, then the derivative or the differential of that constant is going to be 0. Alright, if we know these, then we should be well on our way. Alright, let's take a look at our first question, which is also displayed on your screen. Y equals 4x plus 9 over x. So sometimes when you get a question like this, it is better to rewrite it. So for example, this question could be written as y equals 4x plus 9 to the x to the power of negative 1. 9 over x to the 1 is the same as 9 times x to the negative 1. Alright, and then we are ready to use our power rule. The question asks us to find the second derivative, which is d squared y by dx squared. But before we can find the second derivative of the function, we need to find the first derivative. So here we go. This is 4 times x. We know that the derivative of that is going to be the constant itself, 4, plus we're multiplying by negative 1. So negative 1 times 9 times x, and we decrease the power by 1. So this gives us 4 minus 9x to the power of negative 2. Now to the second derivative, which means we're just going to differentiate this new answer one more time. If I differentiate 4, as we said at the start of this video, I'm going to get a 0. And then I'm going to now have minus, we're multiplying by negative 2 times 9x, and we're decreasing the power by 1, which means this is negative 2 minus 1, which means our final answer is positive 18 times x
To the power of negative 3.
which can be rewritten as 18 over x cubed. And that's it for our answer. Our next question says that we need to find the derivative of y equals 3x minus 2 all cubed. And so here we go. And we're using a bit of the power rule, but then this is a little more complicated. We are going to be using the chain rule. And the chain rule tells us that we need to differentiate all of this just like we would for the power rule. So it's 3x minus 2, all of this is raised to the third power. And so, just the same, we multiply by our power. We decrease the original power by 1, but then there is something else to the chain rule. This function that is here inside this bracket, we are also going to be differentiating it. When you differentiate 3x, you will get 3. When you differentiate negative 2, you will get a 0. And so the derivative of what's in the bracket is only 3. What are we going to do with that 3? We are going to multiply our expression by that 3. Alright, and so we now multiply our constants. So 3 times 3 gives us 9 times 3x minus 2 all squared. Our next question also uses the chain rule. Now, as I said before, sometimes it makes sense to rewrite your question. Well, most times. And so, the square root of 5 minus x is the same as 5 minus x raised to the power of a half. Square root of anything. It's the same as raising that anything to the power of a half. Alright? And so here we go. We are supposed to find dy by dx. And so we'll be using the chain rule once more. Here we go again. We are starting off by thinking a little bit about our power rule. So we multiply by the original power. This gives us 5 minus x. And then we reduce the power by 1. Then I'm going to look at my function that I have inside this bracket. And I am going to multiply by the derivative of whatever is inside that function. What's the derivative of 5? That's a 0. Derivative of negative x is going to be negative 1, as that's the coefficient of x. Alright? So here we go, times negative 1. And then we simplify. Half times negative 1 gives us negative a half times 5 minus x. A half minus 1 is going to be negative a half. Negative a half times
5 minus x raised to the negative a half is the same as 1 over 5 minus x raised to the positive a half.
1 times 1, that's negative 1, divided by 2. Your answer does not have the power a half in it,
but it does have square root of 5 minus x, which means the same thing.
Alright, we move to our next question. And in order to complete this one, there are 2 basic rules that we should know. These are displayed on your screen. So let's go. Dy by dx is equal to, we use our power rule, and that's going to be 2 times 2x. If we decrease this power by 1, we know the power is 1. One other rule that we should know is that if we are differentiating a constant times a function, we can take out that constant and multiply it by the derivative of the function. So our function here is cos x, and as you can see, the derivative of cos x is negative sine x. And then we simplify. So this is 4x minus 3 sine x. For our next question, the 2 things we need to know are 1, the derivative of the cosine function, and 2, how to use the chain rule. And so, here we go, we're going to differentiate this as a whole. And so if I'm differentiating cosine 2x, the derivative of cosine is negative sine. And so I'm going to write negative sine 2x. And then, as I said, we are using the chain rule. And so we are multiplying by the derivative of the function that is inside this cosine function. All right, so here we go. The derivative of 2x is going to be 2, and then we simplify. Negative 2 sine 2x. Now this question requires of us a bit of application. Now, we know how to differentiate cosine x, but this question asks us to differentiate cosine x when x is equal to pi over 6. So here we go. First, we need to find the derivative. So dy by dx is going to be negative sine x. Now, we need to find the derivative when x is equal to pi over 6. And so this is going to be negative sine pi over 6. We simply substitute for x pi over 6. Now, sine pi over 6 is the same as sine 30, and you're expected to know this one. So this gives us negative of sine 30 degrees, which is a half. And that is our final answer. Now, I know I said that you must know what sine 30 degrees is because it does help if you know, but I kind of lied. And so if you do not know, you can simply punch in your calculator, sine 30 degrees. Ensure your calculator is in degree mode and you should get your answer. Our next question asks us to find dy by dx when x is equal to pi over 3. And so here we go. Dy by dx, let's differentiate this function, is going to be 3 times what is the derivative of sine x, cosine x, plus what's the derivative of the constant 2? We know that's 0. You don't want to waste your ink. All right, so here we go. So this is 3 cosine x. And so to find the derivative, when x is equal to pi over 3, it means we're substituting. So 3 times cosine pi over 3, and pi over 3 is the same as 60 degrees. And just in case you don't know, you can punch in your calculator what is cosine 60 degrees, and you should get a half. 3 times a half should give us 3 over 2. Now let's take a careful look at this question. We see one function being multiplied by another. If one function is being multiplied by another, then obviously we have a product. And for that, we have what is called the product rule. And so here we go. This is simply what the product rule says. Let us say our first function, we call it u, and our second function, we call it v. Our product rule says our derivative is going to be one function, whether it's the first or the second, but let's start with the first. The first function times the derivative of the second function plus the second function times the derivative of the first, or vice versa. It's addition and it doesn't matter, right? So here we go. This will be x squared plus 2 times the derivative of what we call v. And so we're going to be using our chain rule here once more, and that's going to be 3 times what is in the bracket raised to the decreased power. 3 minus 1 gives us 2 times the derivative of what's in the bracket. The derivative of what's in the bracket in this case is 1. And so you can write your times 1, but you don't have to. Plus, all right, and for space purposes, I'm not going to write times 1. So here we go. Plus, what is v? X minus 1 all cubed times the derivative of u, which is going to be 2 times x. Derivative of 2 is 0, as we know. All right, here we go. Now we can simplify this a bit. This is the same as 3x squared plus 6, multiplying 3 by this bracket, times x minus 1 all squared plus 2x times x minus 1 all cubed. And if you take a careful look at your answer, you will realize that the options you have either have a factor of x minus 1 removed or a factor of x minus 1 all squared removed. And so if you take a careful look, you're simply just going to factorize what is common here and here. What is the common factor? And so that's going to be x minus 1 all squared. If we factor out x minus 1 all squared, you know how factorization works, or you should know. From here, we should have 3x squared plus 6 remaining. And if I factor out x minus 1 all squared from this side, I should have 2x times x minus 1 remaining. All right, and so I'm going to now simplify. And so we now have on this side 3x squared plus 6 plus 2x squared minus 2x. That is equal to x minus 1 all squared times 3x squared plus 2x squared gives us 5x squared. We still have minus 2x plus 6, and that is our final answer. Our next question is pretty easy. Now, all you need to know for this one is a rule, and it is called the quotient rule. As you can see, we have division. Now, let's name our numerator and denominator. Let's say u is our numerator and our denominator v. The quotient rule simply says, if we are differentiating this, it is going to be v times the derivative of our numerator minus our numerator times the derivative of our denominator. So let's go again. Our denominator times the derivative of our numerator minus our numerator times the derivative of our denominator. And all of that is being divided by our denominator squared. That's it. All right, that's all we need to remember for the quotient rule. All right, so let's go. What is v? 2x minus 11. All of that will be multiplied by du by dx, which means I should differentiate u and write it here. Derivative of, or numerator is going to be 3. Derivative of 5 is 0. Minus, what is u? 3x plus 5. Times, when I differentiate the denominator, what do I get?
And that's going to be 2.
And all of this should be divided by, or denominator squared. And if you take a look at the options, we are done. All right, so that question should set us up nicely for this one. This is also a question in which we're going to be using the quotient rule. And so here we go again. If we are differentiating this, then it is going to be our denominator, 5 minus x, times the derivative of our numerator. As you can see, that is going to be 2 minus our numerator times the derivative of our denominator. This is 0. Derivative of negative x is going to be negative 1. Here we go. And that is supposed to be divided by 5 minus x, or denominator, all squared. All right. And so what we will do now is to simplify our numerator. 5 times 2 is going to be 10. Negative x times 2, negative 2x. And this is going to be, let's say, negative. Let's use the negative 1 to multiply our bracket first. Some persons like to take it one step at a time. So here we go. This is going to be negative 2x plus 1. And that is still over 5 minus x all squared, which will give us 10 minus 2x plus 2x minus 1 all over 5 minus x all squared, which will give us this 10 minus 1 is going to give us 9, and the negative 2x plus 2x will give us 0. So this is 9 over 5 minus x all squared. In this question, we see we're at the point 7,4. The first derivative is 0, and our second derivative is negative 5. Now, we are being asked to tell whether it's a maximum point, minimum point. You see the options. All right, and so we need to know just one basic rule. If the second derivative is less than 0, then we have a maximum point. And if the second derivative is greater than 0, then we have a minimum point. So the question you ask yourself at this point is negative 5, which is our second derivative, greater than or less than 0? Negative 5 is definitely less than 0, and so we know that we are going to have a maximum point. Now this question is a bit similar. Negative 2, 5 is a stationary point on this curve. The second derivative is given by the function x to the 4th minus 15. Now, as we said just now, if our second derivative at any given point is greater than 0, then we know it is a minimum turning point. If it is less than 0, then we know it is a maximum turning point. So what we need to do at this point is to substitute the value of x that we are given for the point, in this case negative 2. So negative 2 to the 4th power minus 15. And so the second derivative at this point is going to be 16 minus 15, which is 1. And 1 is greater than 0. And so we know this is a minimum turning point. This question requires us to find the values of x at which the stationary points occur. Now, one important fact that we must know is that the stationary points on the curve will occur when the gradient is 0. And by gradient, we know we also mean the derivative. All right, so here we go. We're going to be differentiating. So this is 3 times 2x, decrease the power by 1, and so that power is now 2, minus 2 times 3 times x, decrease the power by 1, so that's 1, minus the derivative of negative 12x is going to be negative 12, our power is also decreased by 1. And the derivative of our constant is 0. We will now simplify. So this is 6x squared minus 6x minus 12. And since we say dy by dx should be equal to 0, since dy by dx is equal to 0, then 6x squared minus 6x minus 12 is also equal to 0. We can make this quadratic equation that we now have be a little simpler by looking at the terms and dividing by a common factor. So that's going to be divided by 6. So this gives us x squared minus x minus 2 is equal to 0. And the two factors that we have for this expression here, x squared minus x minus 2, is going to be x minus 2, x plus 1. And so if we should solve this equation, x minus 2 is equal to 0, or x plus 1 is equal to 0, the values of x are going to be 2 and negative 1. And that's it. Feel free to go over these questions again so that you can keep revising the rules. So in order to do these questions, you must know a few basic rules. The power, quotient, product, and chain rules, and ensure that you know the derivatives of sine and cosine. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Donisha Gordon, and this is DG Makes Math Easy. See you next time.